Before we start today's episode, I wanted to let you know that my brand new program, Emotionally Fit, is coming out on Monday, July 22nd. This program helps you to reduce physical pain and chronic symptoms by teaching you how to manage, express, and release your emotions in a healthy way. If you have chronic pain or symptoms that have not gone away from using different medical treatments, it's time to look into something different called TMS. This is a condition where the chronic sensations are not coming from any problems with your body, but actually from your brain and nervous system dysregulation. One of the tools that will be very helpful in this case is emotional work. Even if you have been aware of TMS for a while and used all the tools such as repeating to yourself that you're safe, calming yourself down, you've stopped going to medical professionals and so on, but your sensations are still there, I'm almost positive that you have not looked into emotional work yet. And this is what this course is designed to help you with. Emotional awareness has been one of the most healing tools for me when it comes to getting relief from chronic back pain. And that's why I'm so passionate about sharing the tools that have helped me with you as well. This brand new program, Emotionally Fit, comes out on July 22nd. And if you sign up before the end of the day on July 28th, so that's 1 week, you'll get a $50 off and a one-on-one bonus call with me. I'm super excited to see you in the program, and keep an eye out for the announcement on my Instagram and my emails on July 22nd. Now, let's get started with the show. Hey everybody, how are you doing? This is Kirsten here, and this is a Better Way with Kirsten podcast. On this podcast, we're talking about how to recover from chronic sensations, whether it is pain or some other sensation that constantly shows up in your body, but doesn't have a clear, identifiable, clear cause. In other words, you may have gone to many doctors, many healthcare professionals, and you've run all these tests and tried so many supplements, so many diets, so many stretches. If you have a let's say pain, you've done all of these things, protocols, you just name it, and nothing has really helped, and you're still dealing with the same issue. So if this is the case for you too, then what we're talking about here is called TMS, which is basically a condition where your symptoms and sensations are coming from your heightened nervous system and your brain. So if your knee is hurting, the problem is actually not in your knee. If your back is in pain, the problem is actually not in your back. If you're chronically fatigued, then it may nothing have to do at all with you like doing too much exercise or some of the things that people are talking about. Or if you have chronic stomach issues, it may not be the case at all that you're eating something wrong. What might be going on is that these symptoms and sensations that you're having are coming from your brain and your heightened nervous system. So this is known as TMS. There are plenty of resources out there about this. So I hope that you trust this diagnosis, quote unquote diagnosis, because if you have tried so many different things out before and they have not helped, then there's a really good chance that what this is TMS. And then it's important that you stop using these other tools, because the tool that really helps you heal here is working with your brain, working with your mindset, and I would also say working with your energy. Of course, you always want to make sure that you get checked out, that you know that there's really no structural damage or something big going on. So it is definitely important that you get these things checked out. But like I said, if the problem keeps coming back and if it doesn't respond to any of the quote unquote normal treatments, then it's definitely time to look into what we're talking about here. Okay, so what I want to talk about today is this. Is it necessary to go back to childhood and revisit some of those old traumas if you want to recover from this condition called TMS? And I see people have different thoughts on this, different opinions. Some people say that absolutely no, you don't have to go there. You don't have to go, so to speak, digging, and you don't have to, get traumatized again by going back to some of the things that may have been pretty unpleasant. That's not important. That's not necessary for you to recover. Now, other people say that it is important because this is where you understand where these problems started from. And if you don't do that, so to speak, digging work, it's going to be really difficult to get better, to heal from these chronic sensations. So, what are my thoughts on this topic? Well, I can tell you that for me, I had to go back and do a little bit of digging so that I understand why I'm having these symptoms now, which would then help me to find some tools that I can use in order to start feeling better. So while it may not be necessary for everybody, just like journaling is not for everybody, affirmations are not for everybody, somatic tracking is not for everybody. I think also this one, you don't necessarily, not everybody has to necessarily go back to their childhood and look at what was going on there. But I think that for a lot of people, including myself, this is helpful. And because it helps you to understand your current habits and behaviors. And it's your current habits and behaviors and emotions that are causing these symptoms and then sensations. And they started from childhood. Like everything starts from childhood. The people we are right now, this was already started in our childhood, right? So it's super important if you're able to go back to some of these things and see, oh, that's why I'm acting this way. That's why I'm always thinking this way. This is just something that comes from childhood. And now I've been carrying this with me into my adulthood. And I'm having these symptoms now. Of course, the reason why I have symptoms right now is like what's going on in your mind right now. What are the emotions that you're experiencing right now? Of course, these are the reasons why you have the symptoms right now, but they started back in the day. And to me, it was helpful to go back and see what started it. What is the dominant emotion that I'm probably experiencing day in and day out? And can I see the connection between that emotion and something that happened when I was younger? And by the way, if this scares you, like it doesn't have to mean that you had some horrific, capital T trauma happening there. It doesn't have to be this way. It can be something, let's say something that you were like mildly bullied. I don't know if you can bully mildly, but you were teased or something like that, but you were more just like a gentle, sensitive person. And for you, it was a big deal. As a child, it was a big deal for you. You may also sometimes think, oh, yeah, my parents did divorce, but there's a lot of parents who divorce, so it shouldn't really affect me. But sometimes it does. A lot of times it does. Actually, childhood, experiencing your parents' divorce, for example, in childhood is one of the biggest indicators of these sensations. A lot of people feel really rejected and really abandoned. And when we're young, we may develop this idea that there's something wrong with me, and that's why it happened. So there are things like that in our childhood that happen and that then shape our personalities. And that's why I think it is important to look into these things potentially and see why are you the way you are right now, why you're having certain thought patterns, why you're having these chronically recurring emotions. Because let me tell you, the chronic pain or chronic sensation is oftentimes a chronic emotion. That's why you're having this pain. And I'm going to do a different episode on that because this is really was one of the big realization for me when I realized that the chronic back pain was actually just a chronic emotion that kept coming back and was not a positive emotion. Okay, so I'm going to give you 5 examples today of how going back into your childhood and looking at some of the events there may help you realize why you are feeling the way you are feeling and what are the tools that you can then use in order to start feeling better, in order to sort of start healing these wounds that are maybe created when you were younger. And again, it doesn't have to be anything super traumatic. I think a lot of people think that it would be. And for me, it was the same thing. I was like, oh my God, what if I find something like absolutely horrifying? And it doesn't have to be like this at all. So when you do this work, be chill about it, be relaxed about it. It's going to be fine. You're just looking a little bit into your childhood, what was going on there. And of course, if something is too traumatic, you don't feel like I can do this. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist or something like that. I can't tell you to go there and dig in there, look at it. This work is optional. You can do this, but I will say that for me, it was helpful, and it might be helpful for you too if you haven't done yet and your problems, your symptoms and sensations are still around. And we do do quite a bit of this type of work also in my course, Emotionally Fit, which will be available on July 22nd. So you can find more of this type of work there, because I do find that this is important and helpful. Okay, so now 5 examples of how these childhood experiences are impacting the way you are right now and could also be causing these sensations and symptoms that you're experiencing. So the first example is this: if you were bullied, right? And it doesn't have to be, again, just a major thing, but maybe you're like slightly, you're teased, you're bullied, or sometimes made fun of, or something like that. So now, as a result, you have low self-worth, especially if this happened several times. And these people who maybe did this to you, right? We don't have to blame anybody. We just look back to it. Okay, yeah, this is what it was. Now they created a lot of shame in you, right? It makes sense, right? They made you feel bad about yourself. And as a child, you're really vulnerable to that type of stuff. And a lot of adults still are too. And now, if we were shamed, if we were told that you're not good, look at you, oh my God, how do you do things? Whatever the things were that you were bullied about, you were feeling a lot of shame. That's just what happens, obviously, right? Because we all want to be liked, we want to be approved. And now, if there's a person or group of people who is bullying us, that leaves a little bit of a scar, doesn't it? And so now you grow up with this feeling of low self-worth. Not everybody, again, not everybody. It doesn't happen to everybody. A lot of kids could be like, yeah, whatever. I don't believe this. Like, yeah, they know their self-worth. They don't have a problem with that. But if you are a little bit more sensitive, you're going to start taking it seriously, and you let your self-worth drop because these people did something, right? Or that person who bullied you. And if it happened constantly, all the time, then you were just getting really hurt inside, right? And this pain actually can now be showing up in your physical body and be one of the symptoms that you're experiencing. So what are some of the tools that you could use here? Well, one of the really good ones is expressive writing, right? I believe one of the first people who started talking about it was Dr. David Hanscom, but of course it has been talked about later as well, maybe before as well. But basically the idea here is that you write out everything that was painful for you. Like, yes, this really sucked, it made me really angry. I wanted to, I don't know, beat these people up. Why not? You're a child. This is probably what you actually did want to do, but it's your adult mind that's telling you, no, 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 this is not good. This is not socially acceptable. I'm not saying that you're going to go and beat anybody up, but on a piece of paper in your own journal, you can do this. So let that anger out. Experience this anger that you maybe back then couldn't experience because you can't show your anger to your bullies, right? So this is just one example, and it can bring a lot of relief when you can write about this thing. And then also how it translates into your life now is that you still probably feel a lot of shame about yourself. Shame is a big topic in my Emotionally Fit course that's coming out, like I said, July 22nd. So there, you still carry a lot of shame in you. And in this course, I'm teaching you how to recognize it, how to know there's some body language, there's some habits and behaviors that you're constantly doing. And also because you feel a lot of shame still to this day, you probably are internally angry. So you can use this expressive writing method also now, right? Every time you feel like anger is coming up, you can write about it. So this is a really fantastic tool. And I know several people who have gotten relief from their chronic sensations by writing about their anger. Nicole Sachs obviously has a whole method around this topic of journal speak, right? So just write and write and write until you write everything out. And again, this is not something that works for every single person. Not everybody needs to do it. It's not helpful for everybody, but it is helpful for a lot of people because, like Nicole Sachs wouldn't have like these hundreds and I don't know, hundreds and tens of thousands of followers and people who follow her work if it didn't work for some people. So it definitely does. So the first example was if you were bullied a lot of times when you were growing up, it hurt you. You might be carrying this anger with you. It caused you a lot of shame. And now, as an adult, you still have this shame in you in your everyday life, right? And then you may still have places where you're not expressing your anger, and you really should. In a healthy way, that is, in a healthy way, obviously. Now, the second thing how, going back to a childhood can help is that if you have very perfectionistic tendencies, and this also obviously started from childhood. Why is it important to even talk about it? Because if you are a perfectionist, you expect everything that you do in life to be 100% flawless and perfect. That means that you're really hard on yourself, really hard on yourself. And if you're super hard on yourself, you might also be using shame on yourself. Like, oh my God, you can't get this thing done. Look at you, you totally suck. You always fail at everything, right? So if you're a perfectionist, you may have this inner thought. You also push yourself to the max in everything that you do. Guess, is this draining? I think it is very draining for your nervous system. You're never satisfied with yourself. You're never happy with yourself. So now when we go back to childhood and see where did this start, then we can see maybe we had parents who expected us to do perfectly everything. And every little thing that was not perfect 100% was seen as a big error, right? Something awful. It should never be this way. Maybe you got punished. Something like that happened, right? And now you have carried this from your childhood into your adulthood again, and you expect yourself to do something that is not doable, which is perfectionism, right? And now you're really hard on yourself. You're creating, again, this like you have this internal anger, right? You push yourself so hard, and that can cause chronic sensations in you. So, what can you do? What is the tool here? You have to start using more positive self talk and be compassionate with yourself. Use more self soothing. When you catch yourself in the habit of perfection, this has to be done 100% accuracy, otherwise, not perfect. Then you're going to start catching this and tell yourself, it's okay if this is not perfect. It's okay. I actually am perfect in my perfection. So it's totally like we are perfect already, but not in a way that we think in our minds we should be. I hope it makes sense. So you don't have to push yourself super hard. Catch yourself when you start doing this and understand that this is a habit from the past. You didn't come up with this. It's somebody else. It's probably your parents or caregivers or teachers, somebody like this who came up with this and asked you, required you to be perfect at certain things. And now you just have taken this on and started doing this to yourself. And this is not healthy. So if you can go back and see where this is coming from, you realize, oh, that's actually not me, right? I didn't tell myself that I have to be this way. And then you can easier like let go of this requirement that I have to be perfect. And when you're able to bring more self-compassion, more self-care, more self-soothing, it is very healing for your nervous system. And you can notice that your sensations may start going down as well. All right, another example that I want to give you how it's helpful to go back to past sometimes is that if you avoided sadness all the time, right? Maybe there was something in your childhood again that happened that, made you really cry or made you really sad, but then you were told, nope, can't show that, or like, oh, you're such a crybaby, or stop it already, right? Maybe you learned that this is a bad thing. And if you bottle up your sadness, as a child because you find like it's safer to not show it because if you don't show it, then you don't get in trouble. Maybe this was one of the cases. I don't know. It's individual for everybody. But if this was one of the cases, then now you have learned that sadness is bad. Can't express it. And again, you bring it into your adulthood too. And we have it so much in our society like, oh, you can't show that you're soft. You have to be tough. You have to be hard, power through, put on this mask that everything's perfect, just power through, right? How often people say, oh, I can't cry. No, I cannot cry. Well, people may not say it too often, but they think it very often, right? This is like a big sign of weakness. I'm not supposed to do this. And so now you bottle this thing up in your adulthood too. Maybe when you were a child, maybe you were not told that crying is bad or, you're crybaby, but maybe you learned this by observing other people's behaviors. Let's say one of your parents was sad often and you're like, oh my God, I don't want to add to that because you wanted to, in a way, protect your parents, right? So you're like, I can't show my sadness. If you were bullied, coming back to this first example, obviously that made you sad, but you're not going to talk about it at home because you don't want to make your parents more sad, right? You don't want to have these emotions showing up, so feel like, oh, it's safer that I don't show it. And now as an adult you don't express it either, right? And that was totally my case too. I did not express any of it, and crying was really hard. It just didn't come out. It just didn't happen. So it's important that you see that connection there too. Okay, where did it start? What am I doing now? So that's the important thing, right? Because the symptoms, sensations you have now are based on like what's happening now. And if you now too suppress your emotions, one of them being sadness, then this is why you have these symptoms and sensations. And when you go back and see where it started, now you can tell yourself, oh, it's actually okay to cry, right? I was told that it's not okay, but that's not true. It is okay. And then you can give yourself this permission that you don't have to be tough every minute of your life. You're allowed to have emotions. It's okay to cry. You give yourself this permission. And when you cry, then you're going to feel better. I think everybody knows this who has cried that, after you have this cleansing cry, you feel generally much better. So allow yourself to do that. It's totally fine. And if it came from a childhood, you just know that it was not true. Okay. Then other thing that is helpful when you go back to childhood and see what happened there is that if you are always doing what other people want you to do, excuse me, if you're always doing what you want other people to do, then you are pushing yourself down. And again, what's the connection there between now and your childhood? If you did it then to keep peace, right? Let's say that in your home you had to like keep peace, you don't want to rock the boat, you didn't want to cause any trouble, then you just didn't voice your opinions. For example, you didn't speak your mind because you thought, oh my God, what if somebody's not going to like it and then I'm going to cause trouble for other people? And that's how you learn to people please, right? You adjusted your habits and behaviors and things you said according to other people. And you might be doing the same thing right now. People pleasing is massive, right? I don't think I know anybody with who has experienced TMS who didn't have that trait. Most of us have that. And we're like, we just want to make sure that everybody else is happy so that we don't get in trouble, or we think that if we don't please everybody else, that we get in trouble. But this is probably not the case at all. Again, this is learned from childhood. And what we're doing, if we're still into adulthood, do this, is that we're creating internal anger, right? We're angry inside, we're going into conflict with ourselves. And this is definitely a recipe for creating these physical sensations and symptoms in our bodies. So maybe you go back to childhood, you find something that you always had to do, even though you didn't want to, and you never spoke up about it. It created a lot of anger. Now you have the exact same habit. You people please, you say yes to everybody. You cannot say no. You say, yeah, sure, I'll do this for you. If somebody pisses you off, you're not saying anything. You're like, oh, it's okay. It's okay. It's totally fine. No, no problem at all. Absolutely fine. Internally, you're angry, right? And then this is what causes sensations. Okay, what's the tool here? Learning to set boundaries and speaking up for yourself, right? So if somebody asks you always, could you do this for me? And normally you would say, yes, 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 no problem. Even though you're already pushed to the max and have no space at all, you still say, yes, yes, yes. No, then you're going to just start speaking up. Hey, this doesn't work for me right now. I'm sorry. I really don't have the time or energy available for that, right? So just say it. And it's not that hard. It can initially feel like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be really bad person. This is horrible. You're going to feel like guilty and all these things. I shouldn't be saying, no to people. But yes, you should for your health. You should. And also setting boundaries. If somebody is actually really um, crossing the boundaries and you have already asked, then you just have to be tougher and you have to be like, no, this is not going to work for me. And I'm not going to do this, whatever the example might be. But you have to become more assertive like that. And you have to start speaking your mind, voicing your opinions. And you don't have to people please everybody. It can even go as far as sometimes people start people pleasing total strangers that have no role to play in their lives, but just this habit is so strong that we're like, oh no, I have to make everybody happy. Um, One good recent example that I saw, somebody was talking about it on social media. She said that, yes, like if a follower said that she didn't like the font that I used, I would change that, right? Things like that. A follower, a person that, she didn't even know, somewhere in the world, she would be like, yes, I'm going to change the font. But can you change the font according to every person on Earth? On the Earth? No, I don't think so. You can't do that. So people pleasing is is not a good habit, and it does cause symptoms. Why? Because it creates chronic anger in you. And we have talked about chronic anger already quite a bit on this podcast a couple of episodes ago. And then the last thing, when you go back to childhood and find that you're always really terrified of any conflict, then you are probably still this way. If you haven't done the work, if you have done the work, if you have learned to, again, voice your opinions and handle conflict, if you have done the work, then you probably don't have this problem. But if this is a totally new thing to you and you're right now like, oh, wow, yes, this is me. Like I was always super afraid of conflict when I was little and I still am, then this is a really helpful thing to understand. And that's why I'm saying that sometimes going back to childhood is helpful so you can see the things that happened there and how they're impacting you now. So maybe as a child, you were absolutely terrified of like, you say something that another person doesn't like, maybe it's a parent or a sibling or a teacher or somebody like that. And then you were, really terrified to say anything because you thought you're gonna get in trouble, right? And maybe you did get in trouble and you were hurt and this was a painful experience. And now you've learned that I cannot ever have a conflict. So what are you going to start doing is again pushing down your thoughts, pushing down your feelings, your emotions, your opinions, just so that you can keep peace because you're so terrified of conflict. And probably in your mind, it's also like you're thinking, oh, like if there is a conflict, that's going to be awful. And if you have like a history of like abandonment or rejection or something like that, most people have a little bit of that, at least a little bit, then you may also think, okay, if there's a conflict, it's going to mean that the other person is going to leave. And that's why I think, oh, it's better. It's better to avoid it altogether because that way I can guarantee that they're not going to go anywhere. So this can absolutely be the case too. Again, did this happen in your childhood? Maybe it happened in the childhood. But now what you have to do to overcome this is that you have to start again voicing your opinions. And first of all, understand that a different opinion isn't always a conflict, right? I think in our minds, we're really terrified. Oh my God, this is going to be awful. But it may not be. Like people have different opinions, and that's totally fine. So you can also look into, oh, is this a people-pleasing habit here? Like, oh, I should be thinking the same way the other person is thinking because I'm not allowed to have a different opinion. So let me adjust my opinion according to the other person's, because otherwise there might be a conflict. Is that how you're thinking? I know I used to think this way. Totally. That's totally me. And then the other thing is that if there is a conflict, right? There is a misunderstanding or something, and then there is a conflict, it doesn't mean that it's the end of the world, and it doesn't mean that you cannot handle it. It's going to take some training. You're going to have to put yourself through it. If there is a conflict, you have to be open to have a conversation and talk about it and actually say what you mean. And that could be a totally new thing, but you can do it. It's normal to have conflicts. Like most adults have conflicts. You can't like go through life and not have any. So it's totally fine to have them. It's just that we have to learn to handle them and to handle them in a healthy way. So all these 5 examples, you may see the connection here with your childhood. Take a look at your life. If these things happened in your earlier childhood, are you still doing these things? Because that's what matters. Like I've said several times here, that's what matters. If you're still doing these things, if you're still living your life like based off of these childhood experiences, these wounds that were created, if you still have these personality traits that were created back then, we have to start changing them. And when we start changing them, what happens then? We become more confident person and we become more aligned with ourselves. And this is what brings physical healing too. It really does. Because right now, like I've mentioned before too, if you are doing all this, people pleasing and conflict avoidance, and you go hide and you are filled with shame, you are not in alignment with yourself. You are not the person who you're supposed to be. And because a lot of crap may have happened in childhood, that's still influencing you, right? So, all that to say, I think it is helpful sometimes to go back to your childhood and see what happened there. If you're able to resolve your chronic sensations without doing that, cool. I'm like, whatever helps you. I think this is absolutely fantastic. Whatever method helps you, really good. Go ahead and do it. If you don't ever have to dig into your childhood, perfect. That's totally fine. I know that for me, it was so helpful. It was really, really helpful. Some other things that were helpful to understand were like about being an introvert. definitely a highly sensitive person. So not so that I can put like labels on myself, like, oh, I'm that. That's why I have the problem. No, it's like it gives you insight. It's like, oh, I see the connection now, and now I can use this tool to help myself. So this is how it works. All right. Thank you so much for being here. Just one more time, a quick reminder that my program, Emotionally Fit, which is emotional regulation program where we're going over a lot of the similar things that I talked about today, and a lot of tools that you can use to start feeling better. This program is coming out on July 22nd. So keep an eye out for that. If you have chronic sensations, you have done all the things, you have told yourself I'm safe, you have gone back to life maybe, or maybe not yet, but you haven't worked with your emotions yet, then I really highly recommend that you get that course. All right. Thank you so much for being here today, and I see you again in the next episode. Take care.